Hello, everybody. This is Bob Lohr. I'm Chief Marketing Officer with Celerity. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar presentation entitled How to Leverage Your Internal eDiscovery Program to Optimize Results. Again, thank you for visiting today. We've got quite a few people from different walks of life in the industry, and we've got several different topics we'd like to cover today. If you go to the next slide, please. Essentially, we got 6 different topics and 3 different speakers, which I'll introduce in a moment. We're going to be briefly discussing customer support, essentially the program definition, how to set goals for your internal programs. We'll touch base on the technologies involved. Also, have a conversation regarding the expertise, staffing, development, and training that's necessary to operate and optimize your programs once implemented. We'll talk a little bit about the service model design, how to set this up, and something's called the 80-90 rule, which we'll go into details a little bit later. And then we'll talk about your overall business model, whether you're at a law firm, a corporation, or a government agency. Your business model may be a little bit different, but we'll talk a little bit about goal setting, pricing, billing, and other things on how to manage vendors like Celerity. As we progress throughout the webinar today, if you wouldn't mind, hold your questions till the very end. Enter them into the Q&A box in the Teams interface, and we'll answer those at the end of the show. That way we can keep the content moving and the speakers flowing. Also, tomorrow, probably midday Eastern time, you're going to receive one more email from us with a link to our post-webinar landing page where you can access the copy of our presentation in video format, as well as take a quick survey and also get the slides from the presentation in PDF format. Okay, so with that, for those of you that aren't that familiar with, Celerity, I'd like to maybe tell you just a little bit about us. This is the only slide that we'll talk about here. Celerity Discovery is essentially a division, one of the 3 main divisions of Celerity, who's involved in the utilities industry. We provide services to both the utilities industry from the eDiscovery perspective, as well as directly to the end user market at law firms, corporations, and government agencies. So if you look at the second paragraph, what really makes Celerity Discovery unique is we've got really deep roots in complex data analysis. Unlike some of the other eDiscovery related firms out there, these guys have got incredible quantities of experience in all phases of eDiscovery matters. And our ultimate goal is to help clients convert their raw data into what we call clean intelligence to optimize cases and mitigate risk in the process. So that's just a little bit about our company if you're not that familiar. Without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce today's speakers here real briefly. I'm not going to go into great detail as you get to meet each of these people as they collaborate on this presentation. And all 3 of these gentlemen bring a wealth of experience in different areas of eDiscovery, whether the legal or the as an attorney or in the operations side, et cetera. So just so you know, as we're going through today's presentation, it'll be more of a conversation. We don't have individual slides delegated to different people. It's going to be conversational, almost in like a panel discussion type of format. So but with that, Brian Gauthier is our Vice President at Celerity Discovery. He's going to be taking the main lead today on presenting the information. Fabio Salita, hopefully I pronounced it, Salita, I believe it was, who found out is Portuguese and Spanish, I believe, from our conversations the other day. He's a Director of eDiscovery and Lit Technology at Pekar and Abramson Law Firm. And then also we have Nikosi Sharp, who's also a highly experienced industry eDiscovery leader with multiple different firms, et cetera, in different areas of litigation practice. So with that, I'd like to hand over the mic to Brian Gauthier. I'll go behind the scenes and I'll catch you guys at the end of the show. Brian?
Thank you, Bob. Again, my name is Brian Gauthier. I'm the Director of Discovery at Celerity. We're going to be going over today a number of things and really how to build out your program inside your organization. So no matter if you're building a program inside a law firm or inside a corporation or in a government entity, state or local agency, right? These are things that apply to all of those places, right? You may have to tweak them. You may have to think about your considerations in your organization, but these are things that are foundational to all those things, right? So fundamental questions, right? What are your goals, right? To really build a good program, you're going to have to understand your goals of not just the people running the program, but also the legal teams that are using the services, be it internal attorneys at a law firm, internal attorneys in a corporate legal department, end clients, right? Who are the programs targeted to? What not just end client or law firm user, but also roles, paralegals, attorneys, litigation assistants, etc. And what services are you going to provide? That's probably something that has almost an endless amount of different pieces to it, right? Are you going to do project management, technical services, support the platforms, do development work maybe? So there's a lot of things that go into all of this, right? So we're really going to dig into this and try to figure out if you're going to build your program or try to rebuild your program, because that happens as well. What are the things you're going to need to do? From a standpoint, we've identified these areas, these 6 areas, right? From a customer support, technology, expertise, staffing, service model, business model, and who the targets are, right? Those are the main things that really you have to consider when building out your program, right? Because no one's going to use your program if you don't have great customer support. If you don't have the right technology, it's not going to be used either, right? So those are big, foundational things. The next thing really is, how do you bring expertise into your organization, right? You're doing this because there's a need, and how do you get those people? And then once you have that staff, that expertise, those processes, the technology all together, how do you maintain that, right? That's just as important as getting it, is maintaining it and letting it evolve and grow, right? And then your service model, right? What services are you going to provide? Because if you have a small team of people, maybe half a dozen, or maybe a larger team, a couple dozen, 3, 4 dozen people, right? You still can't compete. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry for eDiscovery out there. How are you going to recreate all of that? And I think you have to be selective in the services you're going to provide, so you can be experts in those. And then the business model too, right? Not only is this like a service, but in the law firm side, not so much the corporation side, but the law firm side, really there's a idea to capture billable time and maybe billable, fees for some things that are like hosting or processing or things like that. We'll talk a bit about that as well. And really, the last piece here is your target, right? This presentation, this webinar with Fabio and Nicosi, is really for any team or department or groups that are working on a phase or task within the EDRM, right? So some context, right? You're thinking about working on your program. You need to either build a program or rebuild a program. I've talked to a number of clients right now this year that are in this process. And these are some of the items that are really important, right? You want to provide internal service and support, or maybe even external service and support, right? If you're a law firm, you're providing it internally to attorneys and paralegals, but maybe even your end client as well, right? There's always the technology question. How are you going to leverage the best technology? You don't want to overbuild, but you want to have the right technology. Getting back to expertise, and I think we're going to come back to this over and over again during this presentation, is really understanding what you need to do so you can have the right expertise. Those things are very closely connected. And then how are you going to manage the eDiscovery processes and standards, right? So that your organization knows this is what we do and this is how we do it. And then getting really into the goals and business case for your program. And making sure it's adopted. Those are some really big key items of your program. And these type of groups exist, like I said, in law firms, corporations, government entities, and they have different, basically, goals, right? Law firms, there's service, support, and maybe growing revenue and hours and fees, right? Corporations, it's managing eDiscovery providers that do external work for the corporation, reducing risk, keeping data inside the organization so you're not always relying on other people, making sure your standards are being applied, right? Government entities, right? Making sure data is secure that comes under your protection, you have expertise, you're be able to meet deadlines is important to all three of these. So there's different goals, but in general, they're very similar. So from customer support overview, it's really these kind of items here, right? Providing excellent service and support for legal teams. That's really the goal in a nutshell. If you could really boil it down to a statement. And then end clients, right? Same thing. You want to this service doesn't exist but for the clients. So you want to make sure it's client centric, both the end client and the internal client, right? And it really goes into customer service and support. Solutions and technology are really key to this, right? So program definition, right? The department's going to be providing services, and they're going to be providing technology that is unique. Most of it's unique to eDiscovery services, right? Data processing, data hosting, the document review platforms. So, right, and then goal setting. What's the goal for the department? And that sounds easy, right? Provide great services, do a great job, but really being more defined and pinpointed on what you want to do. We want to provide these type of services, and then we want to make, right, to, let's say, maintain data inside the organization, provide great service, have this type of response time, or also maybe there's a revenue goal, right? Those should be really well defined. So we're going to get into that. At this point, we're going to start talking with Fabio and Nicosi. I'm really excited to be joined by them. I've known both of them now for more than 12 years each. I think I've known Nicosi a little bit longer, about 14 years. So Fabio and Nicosi, thank you very much, and it's great to talk to you today about these topics. So, it's interesting, these areas, customer service and support, solutions and pain points, technology and operations. When you see the names of departments that do eDiscovery, they're linked to those, right? It's litigation support, legal solutions, legal technology, legal operations, right? So I see those names of departments over and over again, and it really captures in a nutshell really the focus areas of these departments, right? You want operations and solutions for legal problems, right? So we're going to get into this now. So from a standpoint, now I'm going to start with you, Fabio. What type? You're director now at a law firm. What type of services and technology are you leaning into and using now with your team?
And thanks for having me on the presentation here along with your team, Bryant. One of the things that, as far as technology is concerned, is the consideration that a lot of people are trying to take right now, switching between relativity server to relativity one. Being able to define not only the business case for that potential upgrade, but knowing that at some point in the very near future, relativity is going to switch their model and get everybody to use relativity one, right? So that's one of the considerations. As far as technology is concerned, I work in tandem with my IT, with our CIO, to make sure that our equipment is up to not only spec, more than the minimum spec requirements to be able to perform accordingly, but also within our guidelines for cybersecurity, etc. And then the training piece within my department is getting people acclimated, not only my team, by my external clients who are the attorneys at the firm and their clients, with the how and why we do certain things at the firm the way we do them.
Okay, great. Are there any special metrics that you're trying to capture from how your team is performing?
We base it off of standard throughputs when it comes to data, right? If we have 500 or a terabyte, how long is it taking us to process, not only and troubleshoot all the errors, but getting it to the review phase, and then as well the review metrics and production.
Right. And your team it's not only providing technical work, doing work in Relativity and other platforms, right? But also your team is also responsible for managing outside eDiscovery providers, right? Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, great. I'm going to pivot a little bit to Nkosi. Nkosi, I've known you for like almost 15 years, I think. You've been doing more corporate work of late, so you're going to be our corporate representative today, as we discussed earlier. So from the teams you led and been a part of on the corporate side, can you tell first off, some of the things you've done in the past and how it's different from maybe the law firm perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you guys having me here. So I'd say that the main difference, I'd say, from the law firm perspective to in-house is 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 trying to advise people on the data management of our systems, right? So it's much more information governance based in terms of like, all right, how long do we need to keep things? Where is our data located? Um, and also, we also do run the whole EDRM gamut as well. And we work very closely with our legal operations department, which help kind of bring the tools in, help with billing for outside counsel. We also work very closely with IT because we need to make sure that if it's a company that has a lot of mergers and acquisitions, that when those companies come over, everything is kind of brought over seamlessly, and for it to be done in a fashion in which we're not losing any metadata from those particular documents. So I'd say that that's probably the main difference I'd see in terms of from like the law firm perspective into in-house.
Okay. And in-house, are you doing the equivalent amount of technical work, or are you doing more provider management? Well, can you speak to that?
Yeah. So yeah, from the teams I've been a part of and led, I try to lean fairly heavily on a service provider. I don't think it's a great idea for us to do a lot of work in-house. There are people who are better at that, who work at service providers, who we can lean on to do those kind of things for us, like maybe imaging a laptop or a phone. I mean, yeah, my team and our or I could do it, but do you really want us to do it? Or do we want someone who has years of expertise in this, or not someone who's kind of reading the directions as they go along? So we lean heavily on service providers for that kind of stuff. However, there are circumstances in which we would like to do stuff in-house if it's a highly sensitive matter, or if it's an internal investigation that's being played close to the cuff.
Sure. It sounds like that not isn't just a provider management program, but almost something we'll get into a little bit later, a risk management assessment too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we don't want to take the risk on if we can help it.
Okay, great. From a standpoint of really talking about expertise and staff development and training, let's talk for a second. Like, there's the getting people, defining what expertise is needed, then getting the mandate to hire people. Let's grow the department by X amount of people. What structure are you going to use? Are you going to have a flat structure, or are you going to have with all, maybe, let's just say, for example, just project managers? Or are you going to have analysts and coordinators and PMs and consultants? Training and development, how does that look? What type of training are you doing, technical and non-technical, or and management of a team? So from your, let's start with you, Nkosi. Like, from a perspective, what type of expertise were you trying to bring in on the corporate side, and then in your last couple roles?
So I'd say the most important skill I look for are people's soft skills on the corporate side, because you have to do a lot of cross-functional partnerships with, IT, maybe, people in an engineering department, or just, a whole bunch of different departments, because you're going to need their data at some point or need their help. And so you want to make sure that, the people who are coming in, well, at least for me, right? I look for someone who has good soft skills and who can develop those cross-functional partnerships. I also look for people who have, a good sense of knowledge of the entire process, not just their function. So, if I'm hiring a case manager or a project manager, they also need to know, like, not necessarily how to do it, but like the capabilities of the forensics lead that possibly have, or the data scientist, like, what is capable from their standpoint. So when they're speaking to case teams, they can talk from a place of knowledge, not necessarily having to do it themselves, but speak to a place of knowledge.
Sure. And we're how are you hiring folks, right? Were you going to just LinkedIn, or were you using a recruiter, relying on your HR? Can you, in the corporate side, how are you doing that?
So I'm doing a little bit of both, relying on our internal recruiters, but also, been doing this for a little while, so I know a lot of folks, and I might put like like a little word out, like, hey, we're looking for a forensics lead, or we're looking for a junior data scientist, and if they know anybody, but our HR departments usually can find people. I'm pretty sure they go through LinkedIn or whatever job recruiting sites are there, and that does help, kind of like shift through really good potential people who can come in and start strong.
All right. Fabio, from your perspective on the law firm side, how are you building your team, and what, from a standpoint, can you talk about two things, maybe the expertise you're looking for, and then like the training and the development once someone becomes part of your team?
Sure. And one of the things that I've found is a little bit different than the law firm side is trying to get everybody on board with a program and understanding what it's all about, right? That being said, a culture shift of not just promoting paralegals that have some e-discovery experience, or attorneys, associate level attorneys that might be interested because they have some experience, but trying to bring in fully dedicated non-legal background e-discovery experts. That was a bit of a, I think, culture shock. But now that
Okay.
how the program is working, it has been rather productive. And now that culture shift has taken place, and I continue to augment my team by hiring people that are e-discovery experts, if you will, within their own, whether there's analysts, project managers, um, forensic examiners, and the sorts. Um, but again, getting that culture shift was a bit slow at first. The law firms, things can move rather slow, but with a bit of patience and a good business plan, should be able to implement just about anything you need to within the firm.
All right. And what's their part of the team? What type of development and training are you doing for the team?
I do ask for my team members to participate. I seek, in particular, RCAs, since we're predominantly a relativity firm, and has them to continue with their keeping up with their training for not only the credits to retain their RCA or other certifications they may have from relativity, but there are industry related functions that I ask my teammates to attend, and I do at times as well as some internal training programs just for overall touch-ups and changes and based on regulation and just the overall changes in the e-discovery landscape.
Okay. Sounds pretty thorough. Um, let's see. Let's go to the next slide here. Um, from a model, Fabio, you said something that was really interesting. Do you have a forensic examiner as part of your team? Is that a service that your team is providing internally?
That's actually next on my agenda.
Okay.
With being the end of the year, fiscal years are wrapping up, et cetera, just finished budgets, and I've actually was able to make an allocation to bring into my team a forensic examiner so that we can start capturing some of that revenue. Now, the more complex type or more time consuming type data collections will be handled still through a vendor.
Okay. Sure. And now from uh, I'll stick with you for the next question as well. Do you use contractors as well, or do you flex with outside service provider providing staffing, fractional staffing for your team?
Not yet. I've considered it, but I have been lucky enough that whenever I've needed candidates, um, my HR department does a pretty good at recruiting for external candidates for full-time positions. And as far as variable staffing is concerned, we do utilize some of those paralegals or associate level attorneys that have
Okay.
e-discovery experience.
Great. Nikosi, from your side, pivoting this question to you, from the corporate side, what type of roles were you seeing inside the corporate landscape? Was it pretty flat? Was it kind of hierarchy, analysts, coordinators, consultants, PMs? Can you explain?
Yeah, it's fairly flat, for everybody who's not a manager or director. So, if you're the director of a department, then, the manager underneath you, but then underneath that manager, all the forensic examiners, case managers, project managers, data scientists, it's a fairly flat environment, which does help out. You don't have, like layered pressure on you, which, is happening a lot in the past, but it's gotten a lot better in that respect.
Okay. All right. And the next question is for you as well. From a training and management perspective, you already spoke about the management of it being, director, manager, but from um, a training standpoint, what type of training are you seeing that's maybe could be a little bit, because I know we've worked together at a law firm. I know you've worked at other law firms as well in the past. What's the difference in training like inside a corporation versus a law firm from your perspective?
So I'd say that it's fairly similar. Like Fabio, you try to keep everybody kind of current, especially now with the trajectory of technology, like just kind of going super fast. You want to make sure that everyone's staying current, either going to, a different conference, depending on the role. Like if it's a eDiscovery attorney, I want them going to the Sedona conference or to EDI. If it's, like even like legal tech as well, just to kind of just see like what's out there. Um, I do try to make sure that, everybody's certifications are up to date as well. But it's mainly just kind of keeping up with the technology that's going on right now.
Right, makes sense. I think there's always something to keep up on, right? So there's
Yep.
never an end of topics to train on. And then from a service model perspective, let's get into this. There's the customer service aspect of it, technical services, project management, technology, the 80/90 rule, which we're going to dive into deeply here. Customer service, right? Services provided. I think we've covered most of this, but most of these departments provide, you know, um, customer service of the e-discovery process and also project management of things the team's doing internally, potentially at a law firm and maybe a corporation, but also outside providers, right? So that's a big piece of that. I guess a question for both of you, are you seeing formal project management training for these departments? And not RCA training, not technical training, but like maybe PMI or PMP, other project management courses. Nikosi, why don't we start with you on that question?
Truthfully, I've not seen that been the case.
Okay.
I think, it would be actually quite beneficial, but something that I have not seen that in the case. I think a lot of people kind of just rely on their years of experience and doing what they've been doing for the past, X amount of years, but not any formal training for like PMing
Okay.
stuff.
Sure. And Fabio, for you, I know you've been in, the corporate side, the consulting side, the law firm side. Have you seen that in the law firm or corporate side?
I have not, to be honest with you. I'm in the same boat as Nkosi, that it's just typically, since it's experienced hires that I'm bringing them on board with the eDiscovery background, uh, there's no formal project management training, although they are familiar for the most part with some of the project management methodologies, right?
Right. Now, Fabio, for most of your software, your technical technology, is it on-prem or is it cloud-based? Is it a mix?
It's a mix. It's a mix. And we actually, 50/50 in-house, and the other 50% is through our vendor or set of vendors that we typically do business with.
Okay. Do you have a dedicated external e-discovery like infrastructure provider?
I do. I do.
Okay. Okay, great. And Nikosi, from your perspective and your experience, have you seen, are corporations adopting more cloud-based or is it split like Fabio discussed or
Yeah, I'd
what
say
do you
I'd say it's split. We try to do mostly cloud-based, but we'd also like to make sure we have control of the data as well. So if it's cloud-based and maybe it's hosted in someone else's environment, that we are able to get the data when we want it, and not have to jump through a lot of hoops. But there are some tools that we use that are on-prem, but I'd say it's split definitely.
right? And now, Nikosi, have you seen a defined list of like services your team would do or would not do? So, your team knows pretty precisely what they should be doing and what they should steer away from.
That's a tough one too because we're in eDiscovery, so we kind of perform alchemy on a daily basis.
I love
So
it. Yeah.
it's something that's kind of like just within like a lot of us is that okay, even though it's not really we're supposed to do like I'll help you out, I'll try to get it done, but we do try, especially if we're stretched thin, to say okay, maybe direct them in the place that they need to go, not saying it's that's not me, but okay, listen, if you need this, you might want to reach out to this person, and it's usually like a computer or an IT question that we don't know because that's not within our purview, but yeah, it's probably that kind of situation.
Okay. Let's jump into this 80/90 rule. And I have a whole slide just for this because I think it's really important. It's really defining the bounds of your service, right? And an off ramp, right? Well, we do, well, let's use an example. In a department, it could be a law firm or corporation. They do some data processing internally, but after a certain amount of size, let's say 250 gigabytes, they don't feel comfortable doing that, right? So that gets sent out to a service provider to do that work. So it's kind of an off ramp, right? And that's what you think about it like, okay, this is the work we do, and we do this volume of it, right? Because we have this resources when it comes to maybe for people that do processing, bandwidth, hours. We don't have a 24/7 processing department, right? So it's a great example of it. Some other things could be forensics, like Fabio's has a great forensic background, I know, so he's comfortable having that part of his team. A lot of law firms generally don't have that, right? So it's really understanding what your team does and doesn't do, and making sure that's known to the organization, right? That not that you won't help them get it done, but maybe that won't be done by an internal resource. Let's start with Fabio. What is there anything in your program that you like will offload or send out to a provider rather than have your team do? Maybe one or two examples.
As of right now, still collections. That's really
Okay.
one. And then anything that has to do with the more complex level analytics.
Okay.
Only because there's just, so many hours in a day, finite resources, and sometimes it can be so time consuming that I'd rather offload to a true analytics expert.
Sure. That makes sense. Because I'm going to ask you kind of the same question, but a different way. Seeing you were inside some really large corporations, managing some, vendors, service providers. What were things that you wanted an e-discovery consultant or technology company to do rather than your law firm? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, so definitely forensics work, like especially like imaging. Um, we do most of the collections in house, if it's fairly easy, right? So if it's like something out of like G Suite or Teams or just collecting someone's email, that's a fairly straightforward process. But there are different things. So there's a big thing right now in terms of third-party communication applications with like ephemeral messaging, in which that's not an easy thing to collect, and that is something I would absolutely vend out. Also, complex analytics and searching within relativity. If I don't have anybody on staff who can do that, like for the team on a consistent basis, like a one-off is fine, but if a case is ramping up quite heavily, and outside counsel and internal counsel needs complex searches and analytics ran like constantly, then that's something I would definitely send out to a service provider.
Right. Well, that really gets into our next topics, like of responsibilities, right? Nicosia already talked about this, like data governance, private, and Fabio discuss privacy. There's the innovation component of being, what as an e-discovery team, do you, what role do you play for that in your organization, right? It's a very something that the organizations lean into that department because they are kind of on the cutting edge of some technology. So there's some other things internal responsibilities that are outside of the EDRM, right? Those can come up as well. We're going to skip ahead here. And then really looking at the tech portfolio, right? I think there's 4 elements we're going to go through here. And we're going to mention artificial intelligence because that does always play a role right now. But what stack elements do you have? Technology and data trends, innovation, then artificial intelligence, right? So from a standpoint, you know, I'll ask Fabio this from a, you know, are you providing separate platforms for like trial presentation and transcripts, or is that something you're trying to lean more into relativity? Can you explain a little bit about, you know, from a some of the other things besides just document review of emails, what other platforms you may be using?
Sure, but you know what? Everything is dependent on the type of matter and our client, right?
Okay.
The client can make certain decisions, and if they're used to already utilizing a specific tool for a function within their corporation, then we try to adapt to it and learn it if we don't know it. Transactional type business, you know, they don't necessarily go through relativity, they go through other standalone applications, or even just something as simple as creating images or extracting metadata from them. So we try to be as flexible as possible when it comes to our technology offerings. And again, not all clients are going to be, some people are adverse to relativity. So you have to be able to offer Reveal or Everlaw, any of those other competitors for relativity.
Sure. Because did you see on the corporate side, the corporation using a broad selection of platforms? Or are they really trying to narrow it down to one or two?
I think on the corporate side, they're trying to narrow it down. I have seen that there's just so many different and overlapping technologies in the places I've worked that it just doesn't make sense to use so many that a few do the same thing. But we do try to narrow it down as much as possible. But there are a lot of business cases, especially with new forms of communication and new forms of kind of like just documents, collaborative documents as well, that a different platform might be necessary for a particular thing, or if you have structured data, one platform might work better than the next.
Sure. And I think that that's really, you know, structured data is a big thing, but for a lot of big cases, right? The really big cases, but some of the data trends are, and there's, you know, we've talked about a few of these, that ephemeral messaging that Nikosi mentioned, collaborative data types, you know, Teams messaging or Slack, attachments and links. The thing, well, question for both of you, quick here is, deep fake videos or audio. Have you come across that yet in your work?
I have not yet, and I really don't want to. To be honest
Fabio?
with you.
Ditto.
Sure.
Yeah, it's coming, and it's just a matter of time. And hopefully, there will be a tool that can help differentiate between a real or a deep fake video. Otherwise, I mean, technology is just getting so advanced that it's from to the naked eye, it's virtually impossible to determine if it's fake or not.
That's right. And then that's, you know, it kind of goes down that the almost you have to go down the process of using an expert to identify a forensic expert to do that work, right? Not a collections person, but a forensics person, right? And there's a bit of a difference. So let's go to the, you know, innovation's a big deal for any organization, law firm, corporation, government entity. We'll talk about that a little bit from a standpoint. Fabio, do you have a seat at the table when it comes to that for your organization?
When it comes to innovation, yes, and
Mm.
especially all things eDiscovery related, fortunately.
Okay. And then Nikosi, was the Discovery team part of that in the on the corporate side in the corporations you work for?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a big push that me and my team, definitely pushed for, is that we need to have a seat at the table when these decisions are being made, because there's nothing worse than someone adopting a technology that does not fit the business needs that they thought it did, especially when it comes to like government investigations or lawsuits or what have you, because it's not pulling the right information out. So we definitely make those decisions, along with input from the IT department to make sure that they are able to support it, and they have enough staff to support it, because it has to do with staffing as well, to see, okay, so if we bring like rel 1 in-house, then okay, we need dedicated people, and do we have enough resources for that, or just stuff like that. It's stuff that we have to keep in mind quite a bit.
Sure. And now a topic that has come up in every single conference I've been to this year, and meeting that I have with clients. Clients are really clamoring for more answers for the artificial intelligence question that's predominant right now. So Fabio, I'll start with you. Are you looking to, you know, integrate more artificial intelligence in your department? And if so, like what are your goals for 2025?
So the first answer is absolutely. You know, we are trying to innovate and trying to keep up with the industry trends and changes. AI is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It's being not only adopted but actually utilized at a much faster scale than TAR or the continuous learning models, right? And it seems to be a lot more efficient. I have been vetting a multitude of companies with their different offerings, and to me, there are one or two that really seem to know what they're doing, as well as integrating their AI solution seamlessly with an eDiscovery offering as well.
Okay. Nicosi, what are you thinking about for 2025 for an AI roadmap, right, for a corporation? What do you think they're looking for?
I think for corporations, I think they're trying to utilize AI, like very specifically for coding and to make sure that, priv calls are consistent. Also just, the massive amounts of data that's being exported right now and having to be reviewed is, it's impossible for humans to do that without the possibility of human error in terms of coding documents like that. But I've also kind of been shopping around and just to make sure that the company I'm working with has a really good understanding of it. The team I'm working with also has a good understanding of what the company is able to do and how we're going to use it as well. So it's still like a fairly new kind of concept and just kind of process of work that we're doing. So that we're trying to utilize it as much as possible, but safely.
Right. I think that's the big concern. That's the guardrails of any type of technology adoption, but especially for AI, because there's concerns about hallucinations and use and copyright. There's a lot of concerns about how it's used and what's used on. But okay, let's move into our last topic here. There's goals, from a eDiscovery program business model, right? It's not just the service, but also like what's the business model goals for those really need to be defined. We've talked about that a bit. Pricing, understanding what you're going to pay for discovery if you do it internally. The aspect of like doing hiring providers, right? Those are two different concepts of pricing. And then if you're actually trying to grow revenue, what are you going to bill your end client for, and how are you going to do that? The billing process is always hairy. Electronic billing is the rules the roost right now, and will continue to do so. How do you integrate your program into that? Vendor management. I think really the thing that in this part, as we're kind of running short on time, we're going to talk about is the risk management aspect of it. So guys, Nicosi, I'll start with you. How have you managed risk in the past for your programs?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before in terms of what are we going to do in house, what are we going to do and send out. Like I've used this analogy a few times before. It's like in house we're like your primary care physician. Like we know a little bit about a lot of stuff, but if you're having problems with like your foot, go to podiatrist. Which is go to a vendor for something specialized. So I try to mitigate risk and not keeping everything on us and the higher probability of it not being a sound process that we've done. So I try to mitigate risks there and just to make sure that the vendor understands our protocols and our data handling techniques and what we expect of them.
Right, Nicosi, I always think that analogy, you've used that analogy a few times the last couple of weeks we've been talking. I think it's great because it really puts a fine point on like this is what we do. We're informed about what you want us to do, but I think this is how we should do it, and we're going to use an external resource. I think that's great. Fabio, for you, inside the law firm, how are you managing risk? I know the risk is a little bit different. Is there anything that you do that you think is
it is a little bit different. It isn't.
Yeah.
I do implement similar methodologies like Nicosi, and anything that requires a very high level of expertise, try to farm that out. But then also we have internal processes for anything that's farmed out to go through a thorough QC process before it goes to either our internal or external clients. And that way we do try to mitigate risk as much as possible.
Right. No, it's a hidden cost of any program, right? Is the work you're going to do, then when work comes in that's outside of your 80/90 rule of like how do you deal with that, right? I think that's really how you provide great service is knowing what you do well and that your team are experts in, right? So we talked about risk management and program adoption. I think this is one of the last things to talk about here. Fabio, what you've been at the law firm now, about a year and a half. What type of for your new program? What are you doing to get it adopted by the firm?
I started, to be honest, by doing a tour of each of our offices, a quick introduction, explaining, I want for all my clients, my internal clients, the attorneys at the firm, to understand what eDiscovery is, what it entails, and some of the complexities, not at a very high level. There's no granularity. I just want them to understand the process so they would know the how, when, and why we do things.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I've developed internal training modules on different aspects of almost each stage of the EDRM to get people to further understand what it is that we do.
Sure. I mean that's incumbent upon having a successful program, right? Is knowing that getting to know people inside the organization, letting them know it's there, letting them know the services, and building relationships with them. Nkosi, how do you see any differences on the corporate side?
No, I want to just plus one that one totally. That's one of the not frustrating, but just a continuously Groundhog's Day conversation you have to have with people is like, what is eDiscovery and why you need them to do a certain thing. And so I've had to do also tours as well and, create pamphlets to give to like IT and different things like, okay, so we want to implement this tool and IT is kind of pushing back, well, why do you need this? And then having to explain why we need something, they're able to kind of understand it and having, like just a, a really brief overview of what eDiscovery is just so they can have it and they can understand so I don't have to continuously repeat the conversation.
Sure. Sure. No, I think that makes sense. You're educating not just on, I think there's three levels of education, right? There's the technical education, there's a substantive education, there's the um, soft skills and customer service education, but then there's also the outreach of like, hey, we're here. This is what we do. This is how to use us best. This is the best way to get a good result is super important. Thanks, guys. Um, Getting, other considerations, your program is going to have to be, curated for your organization, but you need a program sponsor for it. You're going to have to do some hard work of understanding like the needs of your organization, what gaps exist currently, what are the wants of the end user, right? The attorneys or legal department, and build the right program. If you need a speedboat, don't build a battleship. If you need a battleship, you probably, probably need to use some service providers. It's going to be too costly to build that battleship internally. And then really come up with a plan. If you have a plan to build your program, you have to have an adoption plan. So that sponsor or the tech committee or the innovation committee, AI committee, all have to be part of that adoption plan. So your services get adopted, right? And then also look at what types of cases and litigation investigations you work on. Um, some people are doing data breach work as well in the eDiscovery area. There's privacy considerations, right? So investigations are always super interesting. I've done many of those over the years and continue to do so. Internal investigations, government investigations, right? Those are all things to consider. Um, but really areas to focus on for your program, customer support, right? People are not going to use your program. It's not going to be successful if you don't have great people um, doing that work, being responsive. One of my former boss at Skadden would only hire people that had experience in retail or as a waiter or a waitress, right? That client service, kind of embed that into your team. Technology, you have to have the right technology. If you're seeing a lot of certain types of data, maybe you need a specialized platform or specialized training for your people and attorneys. Bringing expertise and staffing into the organization is important. Your service model is important. You're knowing your business goals, your KPIs and metrics for both your service and business are imperative for your program to be successful. Key takeaways, goal setting, simple pricing and billing. If you're trying to grow revenue, understanding what your costs are, even if you're not trying to grow revenue, because you have to break even before you can make a profit, right? The 80-90 rule, understand your off ramp. What are we going to do? Set the boundaries for your program, and then determine the things you're not going to do. And that can evolve and change over time, right? As technology gets better, as you grow your team, as you grow the skills on your team, that can change. Define processes for your team. We didn't get too much into that, but make sure you have things documented and you train to that, the work as well as the documentation. Artificial intelligence, that's a key thing, and it's going to be for years to come. It's so easy for people to use. Other areas of your businesses are using it, and there's going to be an expectation your eDiscovery team is as well. Innovation. If you're not innovating, you're stagnating, is a great way to think about it. So think about how you keep on top of new trends, technology, and skills in this area. And then program adoption. You need good sponsors and good buy-in from leadership at whatever organization you're in for your program to be successful. So there we
All
go.
right. Gentlemen, great job. I mean, honestly, based upon how you interacted in a collaborative type of way today during this webinar, I think it's pretty safe to say that collaboration and communication are pretty key in making these projects happen internally. But so really nice job just keeping this conversational, talking on all the key points. And a lot of these things are sometimes forgotten or expected. They just, in other words, there's no Staples easy button to make all this stuff happen together. So you're working with internal people, external vendors, and external vendors, the supply software, et cetera. So it's like orchestrating an orchestra. So really nice job on putting that together and shedding light from all different perspectives. I do have a couple of questions that came in that I'm going to pose to the group here, and you guys can fight over who answers them briefly. But in your overall experience, guys, how long does it take on average to implement or communicate the program adoption phase prior to executing projects internally?
Bobby, you're in the midst of that. Can you want to answer that one?
I'm sorry, guys, I missed that question. I was trying to read the Q&A, so I apologize. What was the question?
Sure. Based in your guys' experience, how long does it take to implement or communicate the overall quote program adoption phase prior to executing projects internally?
In my instance, luckily for me, there was already a pseudo department within the firm. I was brought in to formalize it, right? So it was a matter of I come in with my amount of experience. I've already developed similar, if you will, deployment models at other entities. So it was a matter of just getting to know how the firm operated and trying to get it to fit the firm's needs and wants. That was a matter of probably 2 or 3 months before I was able to say, this is what's going to change and this is how we're going to do things going forward. So I would say 2 or 3 months before I was able to really implement what I was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I've done that before at a couple firms, and it is, depending on what type of changes are needed, 2 to 6 months, depending on, and it happens in phases, right? There's the staffing component of it. There's maybe a data migration from like a technology platform to another one, or infrastructure, right? One firm I orchestrated a move from on-prem relativity to, we got basically leased a infrastructure with a provider, right? Moving that offsite into their data center. So, I mean, 2 to 6 months is, I think, a great amount of time, depending on what you're going to be doing.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm guessing that it does vary based upon the complexities, the size of the law firm, how many people, how many vendors, but that helps put some context, and it's going to change based upon a variety of factors. So nice job on that, guys. Question regarding the 80-90% rule. Is the 80-90% rule applicable to all law firms once programs have been adopted internally, or does it vary based upon a specific law firm? Or the
I,
percentage is the same?
I think it varies not only by the type of law that any particular firm practices overall, right? As well as their clients and their projects. Because, unless you have a service provider level staff, such as like a mini Epic or a mini Concilio or a mini Celerity, and within your organization, you're really not able to handle everything, and you want to mitigate risk, right? You don't want to overextend yourself and offer a service that requires a higher level of expertise, and now you're in scramble mode to get it done. It might not get done correctly. So I think there's a lot of variables that have to be taken into effect.
Sure.
Yeah, that percentage is going to vary depending upon the experience level too of the team and how well the team works together, and is it how big, are we talking about a national organization, right? The bigger the firm or organization, the kind of the stronger those boundaries are, right? Because they can't be as nimble.
Yeah. All right, I got two more questions for you guys, and we'll wrap it up here. Um, Using Celerity as an example here, how involved is Celerity or other vendors that might be involved in the internal program once it's been established and communicating? In other words, you guys just don't go away. There's different levels of expertise and guidance and things that are going to be done. But how long are you guys involved? This was mainly aimed at Bryant here.
Sure, we're involved, and providers in general are involved, but we're involved as much as needed, right? I work with really large law firms who have dozens of people inside their departments. I've worked with a corporation that had over 100 in previous role, people inside their corporation doing eDiscovery work. So, and I've worked with really small firms that have maybe an attorney leading the charge on a discovery case, right? So it really depends on the work they need done. Is it just data processing? Is it processing, hosting, and review? Do we need to do collections work? So it's really as needed, right? We want to partner with people where they're at and what their needs are.
Excellent. I got another question that just came in from Kenny. This was directed at Fabio personally, so he called you out here. You mentioned that AI was ramping up faster than TAR or continuous learning models. Can you elaborate on that specifically with regards to CLMs?
Well, for example, when TAR first came into the scene to the eDiscovery, do you remember how many judges and district courts were dismissing it until there was at least a few major players and cases via white papers that were published in order to be able to establish that trust? When continuous learning models came into the scene, TAR had already done some of that groundbreaking work as far as the acceptance and tolerance levels. And it was also, of course, more efficient. Now, as we are seeing AI being utilized for certain aspects of eDiscovery, that adaptation has been a lot faster. Courts are less apprehensive in comparison to the CAL and TAR models as far as being results driven and accepting those results as a production or evidence.
Good deal. All right.
Yeah,
Last question.
Nkosi, what are your thoughts on that, Nkosi? Maybe he dropped off. I don't know. Yeah, no, I think what Fabio said about the groundwork of TAR and CAL over the last decade. I've seen just so much interest in AI and the different AI platforms that are out there, and the AI that we have internally. That it is interesting to hear legal. I always think that legal trails with it, technology adoption to be so interested in. It's refreshing.
I've got one last question, then we'll wrap up. This one's coming directly for me, guys. I've got 15 years plus experience in the e-discovery space myself, and it's constantly ebbing and flowing and changing with technology. Nkosi mentioned something earlier, and I think you guys alluded to as well, that regardless of adopting an internal program and actually executing it yourself and taking some of those things in-house, what are some of the things that we're typically seeing? Are there trends in what's being done in-house at a law firm or corporation versus what's being still executed on more of the complex things by an eDiscovery firm. Are there changes that are happening in the industry?
I'll start and let the other gentleman follow. I think there's two areas I see that law firms tend to shy away from. It's the kind of the forensics, which we've talked about, and collections. Those two things kind of together. A lot of firms don't have those type of resources, that type of employee able to do that work internally. So that's always been an area where they look for assistance externally, and they also don't want their internal staff to have to be witnesses about how those documents were collected, how is that collection performed. The other thing is something that we are very Celerity is kind of in their wheelhouse, is the big data analysis, like large data sets that come from different types of cases, be it employment and wage cases, be it data analysis of banking data or transactional data, marketing information, right? Tobacco information, could be any of that type of thing. A lot of eDiscovery departments or even IT departments inside a law firm or a corporation wouldn't feel comfortable doing that work. And then that's risk, right? That's a risk. It's not just a skill, but also a risk for both those things. Nikosi, what do you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I answered the previous question. My mic was on mute. My apologies. But no, I agree. I think it really depends on what the ask is and the complexity of the ask. If we're able to handle that in-house and justify how we did it as well. Like, we need to be able to speak on our process and how we did it. And if we are not able to do that, then that's something that we would have to send out to much more someone with a better expertise.
Excellent.
I think
All right,
on the
guys.
side, the one last thing, sorry, Bob, is going to be the price consideration. If it's cheaper to send it to outsource to a vendor, attorneys have that fiduciary duty to their clients to try to keep costs as minimal as possible. That's another determination that goes into play.
Yeah. Yeah. So as much as things change, they still stay the same when it comes to that. And, but this, guys, again, we'll wrap up with this last slide here. And again, thank you so much for collaborating and producing this webinar. I got a few comments from people here about how insightful the conversation information was. So again, really nice job. Lastly, from everybody, from me, Bob Lorum, this is again, thank you for attending today. As mentioned earlier, you'll get an email tomorrow morning or probably by noon Eastern time with a link to our post webinar page where you can access the recorded webinar. Get a copy of the slides in PDF format for future use, and also take a quick anonymous survey if you'd like to provide feedback on how we can make these webinars even better. Then lastly, we have another webinar being put on by Bryant Gauthier and the eDiscovery team at Celerity Discovery on January 29th, which is going to be talking about MLLS. It looks like I forgot to abbreviate with another S. I was thinking baseball, I guess. Multi-language litigation services for cross-border cases. We're going to be sharing our expertise and services and things that we can help you with regarding those matters when they come up. So with that, I'd like to wish everybody a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. However you celebrate the holidays, we will see you again next year on another webinar from Celerity and Celerity Discovery. Thank you so much. Take care.